We are trained professionals. This is all we need is an IT person here to help us out.
All right, let's see which window this is. Screen 2? No. Screen 3? No. Screen 1? It must be screen 2. All right, let's try that. How's that? You see my slides or no?
Yeah. So that's what it's going to look like.
Wait, you don't see my slides?
You see it on the screen? No. I see the little guy with the box and the Sharpie pen.
Yeah, that's not my slides.
Oh no.
Hold on. I'm gonna drop and come right back.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
These are not the slides you're looking for.
All right, that was our show, everybody. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you again. Oh, wait, what?
Oh yeah, because we're live right now.
Oh yeah, we've been live for about a minute.
Roger.
Well, I didn't say nothing.
There you go. We'll put that back up until Du'An comes back on. We'll do our little dance number.
Yeah. So what's going on? What's everybody been up to?
I just got back from a mentor dinner. My latest mentee has graduated from the mentor program, and we had the celebratory dinner where all of the mentors and the mentees got together at UNH, University of New Hampshire, and chatted with them and learned about stuff. And he's got his internship started and all kinds of stuff.
Nice.
All right, there's your deck, Du'An.
There's side decks.
Okay.
The deck was up, and now it's okay. Now I see a console.
Yeah, I'm arranging everything on this window, so I can just swipe.
Okay.
Nice.
I'm gonna have to get that background out there with the spongy.
Isn't that cute? That is adorable.
Adorable.
That is straight stock. My computer crashed like 2 weeks ago, and I have not done anything to it except for install the things I actually need. So
Mac or Windows?
Such an ordeal.
Mac.
That's Mac.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
It's such an ordeal, like when you get a new system, to like tweak all those tiny little things. It's weeks. It's literally weeks of like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that one thing that I love that I only do once a quarter.
Yeah. Oh, so we're already live?
Yeah, we've been live.
I didn't even get that memo. Hello.
So this is how this part goes. We're going to say hi and we're going to say hello to the audience and everything. We're going to do the presentation in post. I'll edit this and cut it down and turn it into like a tight presentation style when Roger doesn't drop off like he always does. Where did Roger go this time?
You caught it right on time.
There he goes. He's like, I'm out. We are trained professionals, everybody. Do not attempt this at home. Clearly, we know what we're talking about. Between that and Shala's button pushing excitement.
That was one time.
I know, but you've only done it once, so I can't.
I'm an engineer. What can I say? Put buttons in front of me. I'm gonna click it.
Buttons get clicked. Absolutely. All right. Well, Du'An, how you been? It's been I haven't seen you or talked to you since reInvent.
Yeah, I've been busy. There's a lot that's been happening in the industry. There's a lot been happening externally, internally. A lot of changes, but they're all good. So
yeah, this AI thing, I keep hearing things about it. Maybe it's a thing. Might fly. Who knows?
Possibly. I'm not sure.
Is everything that you guys are doing now, is it all around like as the DAs of AWS, is everybody like focused on Bedrock, Party Rock, generative AI, all the things?
Yeah, we're actually releasing a lot of different features and services around Amazon Q, Amazon Bedrock. So when you think about where the industry is going, generative AI is a hot topic. And so how can we build things faster, more efficiently, more securely, things like that? And how can we leverage AI for those workloads? So yeah, we're just trying to help our customers build and innovate faster.
Yeah, Q just went GA, so congratulations to the team that sweated through that. That must have been a crazy push.
Yeah. So Q is a lot of different features. We'll kind of go over some of those features. Before,
Okay. Cool.
Amazon Q was Amazon Code Whisperer. So a lot of developers have already been using Code Whisperer in their IDE, which is now Amazon Q. Comes with a chat feature as well in the IDE that helps you innovate, ask questions around code, and build and again innovate faster.
I'm just chatting with the folks in the audience. Welcome to everybody. And GenAI. I can't type and talk at the same time. Awesome. Well, Shala, it's actually been a minute since we've talked to you too. How have you been?
Let's see where to start. Busy. I mean, yeah, people have been hitting me up in the DMs like, hey, where are you? Thanks everybody for checking on me. I'm good. Work has just been crazy. Yeah. And then just regular old life stuff. But I probably will make my return this month is the plan because I got the thing I had to built. So I should have more time on my plate.
You were AFK from V Brown Bag for a minute because you were like, I've got this huge push coming out. Are you going to turn that into a talk? Is that going to be something that's going to come up, or is it like super secret private customer stuff that never shall be talked about again?
I mean, it's probably the latter, but I have to see if there's a way where maybe some of that I can talk about because it's definitely cool stuff that I worked with.
Yeah, because there was some Terraform in there, so that gets me excited.
Tons of Terraform, a lot of DevOpsing.
Yep.
So, yeah,
nice.
I got to. It was fun because I got to prove to myself just how awesome I am. Where something gets tossed my way, I figure it out. So it was cool.
It's definitely validating when you've been working with something and you're like, am I good at this? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm amazing at this. Which we all knew, but I mean, you're just awesome all around.
It's like one of my closest friends, like one of my favorite people, tells me all the time where I'm the one in my shoes, and so everyone else can maybe see that, but for me myself, I'm just kind of like, I don't know, I still feel like the dumbest person in the room, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because that just means I'm learning from others. So if I'm the smartest, then that means I'm about to get bored. So
yeah, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You're not going to.
I need a rhyme.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get this going. A builder's guide getting started with generative AI with our good friend and AWS developer advocate Du'An Lightfoot. Du'An, what has been going on in the world of this crazy generative AI nonsense? What's been going on for you?
Yeah, for me, I've been learning it, trying to apply it, building use cases, learning it some more, finding things that I thought I knew that I didn't know well, because a lot of using it, generating a prompt and getting a response, that's something we typically do, right? Anybody can really do that, but how do you do that consistently? How do you actually create a use case that you can actually take to production and ensure that the responses that you have returned have been validated, have been tested, have been accurate? You know what I mean? So kind of understanding that, and then also understanding the different use cases around information retrieval, because, and we'll talk about this in my presentation in the demo, is that when you using a large language model or a foundation model chatbot, regardless of what it is, it only has context around the data that it's been trained on, right? It doesn't know the current date. It doesn't know the current time. It also may not know the current announcements from like AWS or HashiCorp or WWT, right? Or any type of domain specific information in your company. So how do you actually get that information into the model to help you handle those use cases, right?
This is going to be a fantastic talk. And this is right up Roger's, aka the AI cyber sys alley. on getting into it. So actually, you know what? Why don't we just flip over to this, because there's going to be so many questions on this as we go. We might as well, just get right into it and start digging into generative AI. And I really appreciate that this is coming from a builder's guide perspective, because everybody's using chatbots to answer the questions and stuff like that. But as builders, I want to know how I can use it to do the things, because this is going to be sweet.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm actually going to give a use case that I'm going to challenge people to try it on their own and then try to scale it, try to improve it. So yeah, this is going to be good. If you're ready, we can go.
Let's do it.
Okay. So a builder's guide, getting started with generative AI. Let's talk about that. Today, if I can get my slides going. All right. We're going to cover a quick generative AI overview. Then we're going to talk about prompting and prompt engineer, kind of give you some best practices and understand how to communicate with the foundation models or large language models, as well as the customizing those foundation models. Remember in the beginning, I was talking about information retrieval and ensuring that the information is relevant and current to your domain. So we're going to cover that today, and we're going to be kind of hopping back and forth between the slides. Then we'll go into the console. Then we'll dive into some code. We're going to cover the builder's journey to generative AI. So yes.
Awesome.
All right. So generative artificial intelligence. Now, I'm going to speak to you honestly. When we talk about generative AI, artificial intelligence, right? This data comes from real intelligence. It comes from us. And in order to use these tools, it needs us. So when people think about the future, it still needs the human to be able to have that, I would say, deep domain knowledge to ensure that the responses or the completions that we get from the models are accurate, right? The information that's going into the models, somebody has to understand the data sets that are being used to train the models. So we actually need humans to have a deep understanding of the intelligence of the information. So I just want to kind of preface that when we talk about generative AI. So what is it? Generative AI it allows us to use artificial intelligence to generate new ideas and contents. So think of a blog post, think of summarizing their blog post, think of an image. For example, I want a monster wearing a hoodie, an AI hoodie. And so we'll get a monster and we can kind of iterate on that using generative AI. And all of this data comes from data sets that are public, data sets have been trained on the internet, and allows the model, and I'll kind of talk about how this is actually architected, to basically learn ways to generate the text, to summarize the blog post. It has a deep contextual understanding of language, but not just English, other languages as well, and not just text, images as well, and not just images, videos and sound. There's so many tools and ways that this is being used. There are innovative ways that are coming across the internet and coming across my feeds every day. Now, as most of us know, this has been a really fast growing industry. ChatGPT, when it was launched, had 1 million users in the first 5 days. No other platform has done that. And it's growing even faster now because companies are actually innovating and building with it now. And they're trying to find ways to innovate even more and make things even better. There are new chips being produced to handle the inference, not just on the GPU, but special chips that are outside of CPU and GPU that are being created to handle inference. So innovation is happening across not just the software, but also the hardware. Now, when we talk about traditional machine learning models, the way it was done in the past, you would have a labeled data set. And that labeled data set you would use and train on that labeled data set to do, let's say, a single task like generate text or summarize a blog post. But it took humans to label that data. That's a data engineer, data scientist, all of these people, data analytics, all of these people come together to actually train these models for that specific task. Now, with foundation models in generative AI, you actually have something called self-supervised learning, where the data is not labeled. The model is able to take a ton of data, let's say data from the internet, and then pre-train it, learn the data to get a contextual understanding, let's say, of language, summarization, text generation, just from the data being trained on its own. And then you can adapt it from there for those different use cases. Now, that's just the basics of generative AI. Now, when we're talking foundation models, we have to have some type of way to use our human language, natural language processing to communicate with these models. And that's where prompts come in. So if you heard the term of prompt engineering, we're going to kind of cover that, because it's actually a real skill that I think is useful if you know how to implement it correctly. So prompt engineering is a new way of using machine learning. Previously, you would write code, you would write algorithms, you would do all these things to interact with the model. Now you can actually use text. You can use your natural language to actually generate an output from a foundation model. And so here's an example of how that looks in the prompt. We have our instructions at the top, write a summary of a service, review using 2 sentences. Then we have context. It's an online shipping store. And then we have our input data. This is actually what we wanted to actually summarize. And then from there, we have our output from the model. This is the basics of what a prompt example actually looks like. And there's different ways to actually implement this. So when we're talking prompting, we have zero shot. This is where we tune just for instructions like determine the sentiment. You provide a review from a customer and say, provide a sentiment on this review. You don't give any examples. The model just, depending on how it's trained and its understanding, will be able to provide a sentiment if it has a contextual understanding of what sentiment is for that specific task that you asked it. Different models can handle that better than others. But one way to get around that and to provide a better response is using something like few shot prompting. This is where not only do you provide instructions, but you also provided examples. Okay, provide a sentiment on this review. Now, here are some examples of positive sentiment reviews. Here are some examples of negative sentiment reviews. And then with that, there's multiple different prompting techniques. I'm going to give you a link here where you can kind of go over prompt engineering techniques. It's really useful to kind of cover these and see these in action. But some things to think about with a prompt: you may want to provide a role to the model to act as a DevOps engineer. And then again, task will be to summarize. And maybe the background and objective is I run an online shipping store and my goal is to determine sentiment for my customer reviews and improve our products. And then different variations, provide some guidelines for the model to follow. Again, I mentioned those examples to have that better contextual understanding. And then the latest information. Again, most models are trained to a specific date. I believe the GPT model was trained until December 2023, and Anthropic was August 2023. So anything after August 2023, Claude doesn't have a contextual understanding. So you'll have to provide that in the context of the prompt, which we'll talk about here in a moment, or you can use something like Retrieval augmented generation. And then finally, chain of thought, where you kind of guide the model to have some type of reasoning or understanding of the task that you want it to accomplish. I'm going to provide all of these links, but here is a very useful website, prompt engineering or promptingguide.ai, that has all of these techniques that I kind of covered. Feel free to check that out. I'll drop all of that in the chat if you all have any questions around that. And I'm going to go on a little further, then we'll hop into the console. Now, when we're talking about prompting, there are some best practices for designing an effective prompt when you're communicating with a foundation model. First, I have kids. And when I first started using generative AI, I felt like I was talking to my kids, right? They range in different ages. So depending on the model, it's going to range in different skills and awareness and contextual understanding. But one of the best ways that I am able to effectively communicate with my kids is by being clear, concise, providing examples, guiding them, and instructing them in a way that they can understand. Models are the same way, right? So first, be clear and concise. Next, include context. So the background information from the model or the understanding that the model needs is sure to include that in the context window, which brings me to another thing that I'll cover here in a moment. Depending on the model you use, context windows, or meaning the size of the prompt that you can enter into that prompt or the context window of the model for the model, have ranges of different sizes. I know Cloud has 200,000 tokens. Think of a token as a word. Not always a word, but think of one token as a word, right? So 200,000 words abruptly that you can actually put into that context window and expect a response from the model. And then use directives, so guide instructions that are needed, include any output. Start with a question. Lead with the question, provide example responses to help guide the model to have a better understanding and give you the example of how to respond. Let's say you want the response to come in JSON. We'll provide some of the JSON examples of how you actually want the response to be given. And then break up those complex tasks. If you try to give everything to the model at once, the model sometimes will struggle with that. But if you break it up, maybe multiple prompts, or break it up in pieces to let the model, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, the model will have a better understanding. And finally, experiment and be creative. I look at prompting kind of like writing code, right? When I'm writing my code, I'm running different tests, I'm trying different things that work, especially when I'm first learning. I'm not always writing code correctly the first time. Actually, if I look at my old code now, I think it's not good code, right? And so I'm constantly iterating and trying to improve. The same thing is kind of with prompting.
Same.
Yeah, I definitely look back at my old prompts. I'm like, yo.
Now, since we're kind of covering best practices, I thought I'd kind of put a quiz in here for everyone. And the first quiz is going to be select between prompt 1 and prompt 2 on which one has the best practices that we should follow. With prompt 1, determine the sentiment of this social media post. Imagine there's a social media post inserted there. And then for prompt 2, determine the sentiment of the following social media posts using these examples. And then we give it some examples of positive and negative sentiments, then we insert the post. Which one of these follows the best practices that I just mentioned?
For those in the chat, put a 1 or 2.
I'm not going to cheat. Hold on.
We like to be interactive, y'all.
Awesome. So if we continue, is of course what I just mentioned in prompt 2, we're asking the model, we're instructing the model to provide sentiment on a social media post, but we're also providing examples of which posts are positive and which posts are negative, so it can have some type of understanding of how to look at our social media posts and answer it correctly.
Now, what kind of prompting is that for our audience? Okay, no one wants to answer? Oh, okay, he's cheating.
So,
right, few shot.
Well, yes, prompt 2 is few shot. Prompt 1 is 0 shot because you're not providing any examples.
Right. Yes, and I like this a lot because me personally, I don't know that I personally have never heard anything about 0 shot or few shot. I was just doing stuff. So I think this is super helpful. And I like the name 0 shot, where it's just like you kind of have a 0 shot chance of getting the response you think you're going to get with prompt 1.
Right. How do I start a YouTube channel? Right. You assume the model. I'm sure that's probably like one of the number one questions that people have asked, like ChatGPT. And it provides
passive incomes.
right. But a better question would be, how would I start a YouTube channel that's focused on network engineering with my audience that are network engineers, and I want to focus on a specific brand, as well as I want to make videos around this type of style in this type of format, some people that I admire, let's say it's Network Chuck or some other people, and then it could provide you some guidelines around that, because now it has more understanding of what you actually want and to give you, to help you actually achieve your goal.
See, someone
First time
wants
I did
that.
it told me I should start a cooking channel, and I'm a terrible cook, so cooking with
But
Chris.
that could be good though, because that's entertaining. How bad is Chris gonna mess up this recipe?
Okay, so I mentioned how when I code and the things I had to try, how often is I had to iterate. Some things to keep in mind with prompting is that you try everything, never trust it completely. Once you find insight, focus on execution. So what does that mean? Become your team's AI champion. If you're someone that's passionate about it, learn it, get involved, help others grow. And then once you do that, review those outputs, find the flaws, find the limitations, and there's a thing called hallucinations, meaning that if you don't provide those examples, if you don't provide the contextual understanding for the model, if it doesn't have enough information, it may make up something, right? But I know people that hallucinate. So a lot of times, it happens because of not enough information. If you see that, reiterate on your prompt. Don't always trust the output. Do not always trust the output. Have some type of testing mechanism in place. And I will show you a use case where I kind of built my own testing mechanism in there to determine if it was my accuracy on the responses. And then once you find a solution that works, switch from probing to producing value. Get something in production or get something into a pipeline to where you can get others testing it, you can iterate on it, you can scale it, you can grow, and you can improve, and you can help the business move forward. Now, before we hop into the console, some things I wanted to discuss real quick is that generative AI is merging across multiple domains. So chatbots is one of the most common ways that we see it implemented. Summarization, data insights, data modeling, writing, media design, document processing, which if you have, I don't know about you, but I had a legal document that I had to review. Well, I was going to have somebody do my driveway. And when they were going to do my driveway, they gave me a contract. This is like a 3-page contract. I really didn't understand it. So what I did was I uploaded it to a chatbot, had it analyze it, tell me the things I should be aware of, the positive things of the contract, the negative things that I should be aware of, and then kind of summarize the contract. So now when it does that, I also ask it to give me the lines in there so I can read it for myself, right? So I can show that it's accurate. So since the model, depending on which one you're using, has an understanding to be able to read legal documents, why not use it to our advantage, right?
That's awesome.
That's good.
Okay, so another thing to think of, and I kind of covered this before, is that building generative AI applications is a little challenging. For example, foundation models, when we're using them, you may want to use more than one. There may be a newer version of a model. The API of the model that you were using may evolve to a new model that has a different API parameters that you have to pass in. So these are all things that you kind of have to think about. And then customizing it isn't easy. Again, the contextual information that the model needs. There's solutions around, let's say, retrieval augmented generation, where you can actually bring documents and bring more text into your prompts to help the model be able to answer your responses. But sometimes you may have to fine tune, which I'll kind of cover here in a moment, later on in this talk. But you may have to fine tune a model for your specific needs. Another thing we have to think about is the data privacy and security of the models and our APIs that are communicating with these models. And then getting our foundation models to execute tasks and connecting to those external data sources using something like retrieval augmented generation. And then finally, if you're training your own models, if you're managing your own models, you also have to manage the infrastructure that they run on. That's can be a challenge. So on AWS, one of the ways we're solving that is with Amazon Bedrock. If you all have used Amazon Bedrock, it's the easiest way to build and scale generative AI applications with foundation models on AWS. And I think this is a good time to kind of dive into the console and check it out if you all are ready.
I'm very excited for this. Yes, I'm ready.
Ready.
Do it.
Okay. So now we're in the AWS console.
One of my favorite places to be.
Yes. We're going to click Amazon Bedrock. Once you're in here, we have different providers. So A1, AI21 Labs, Amazon with Amazon Titan, Anthropic with Claude, Cohere, Meta with the newly announced Llama 3, Mistral AI, and Stability AI for image generation. These are all the different providers that have models in Amazon Bedrock. But what Amazon Bedrock allows you to do is to be able to access these models that live on AWS. So rather than having different APIs that you have to connect to, you can actually use the Bodle 3 SDK or API to be able to communicate with these models. And so the first thing you want to do inside Amazon Bedrock is ensure that you have the models access enabled. So you come in here and you enable the access to the models that you would like to test. Here I have the models. I'm going to use Claude 3 Sonnet, which Claude 3 is one of the leading models, if not leading models. I think Llama, Claude are kind of neck and neck right now, but Claude 3 Opus is the most powerful, for the most robust use cases that you may have. If you need something that's more medium sized, we have Claude 3 Sonnet, which is going to be just as fast as Claude 2. And then if you need something that's more lightweight, let's say like summarizing documents and you want it to be extremely fast and not as expensive, this is where Claude 3 Haiku is extremely fast. So to test out these models, go ahead.
Real quick question around that specific piece. There's a lot of different models coming out all the time, yes. And there's different flavors and different speeds even within the same families. When you say pick the one that suits your needs best, how does one determine what they're? I mean, how do I like if I want to chat with Claude, Jean-Claude Van Damme, as I call him, how do I know if I want to use Sonnet or Opus? Is it the complexity of the query? Is it the what kind of data I'm expecting back? What makes me pick which one?
Okay, so there's a couple ways to go about this. The first way, of course, is going to be testing the models, right, and understanding. Another way, which I normally start with, is reading the documentation and release notes for the models. So here, this release notes kind of tells you how these models are graded on the different benchmarks. And so you can see how they're graded on those benchmarks, combine that with cost, right? So if you need something that understands MMLU, so the undergraduate level knowledge or grade school math, you're going to look at the benchmarks. And so each provider probably will have a chart like this, but there's also sites like Helm, where you can go to where they kind of test and evaluate models with their own benchmarks as well. So you can actually see how these actually perform. And then inside of AWS, you can actually come to the chat playground, select the model if you have it enabled, and then you can actually test the model right here in the playground, which we can do now.
Nice. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So one of the things about this is you're going to kind of have your own data sets, your own prompts, your own use cases that you're going to want to have available when you're doing this test. So that way you can ensure, okay, does this model meet my needs? Maybe it doesn't meet your needs, but it's lightweight, it's fast enough, and it's cost efficient for your needs. Maybe it just needs something like retrieval augmented generation just to have more information to be able to process. Or maybe you need better prompts. So these are all things you have to kind of think about.
It's kind of like picking an EC2 instance. Sometimes you want blazing fast, but that T2 micro is awful cheap, so I can get away with it by using it.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So we'll write a simple prompt in here. What is it? How do you guys set up a network? Now, we mentioned before that this is zero shot. And so the model is going to tell me from its contextual understanding of how to set up a network, but does this really apply to my needs? Right? Because what I really meant to say was, can you provide me with a step-by-step instruction for configuring a secure and scalable cloud network infrastructure for a small business with 50 employees in AWS? And so now it knows that I want a network configured in AWS. Now it's going to tell me to create an account. It's going to set up IAM, set up a VPC, and it has a better understanding. Now, what you would do is go through different models to see, okay, these are the type of questions that I'm going to be asking the model. Can the model handle this? And is it fast enough? So here we're using Sonnet, but if we change it to Haiku, and you can see the difference in the speed once I use Haiku. It's like blazing fast.
Yeah.
And if you're,
Totally.
you're using an API, it's like that.
We have a question from the audience. Is there a free tier for leveraging Bedrock services?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But for those that are tuning in today, I do have a survey that you can use for AWS credits.
Nice.
Which will not be available for Bedrock, but I actually do have a workshop available that'll be open for 2 days. So you can go through the workshop and you will have access to Bedrock in the workshop for 2 days.
Nice.
So you can test it out.
We'll post the links. You're not going to actually be able to post the links because StreamYard is weird, but if you give me the links, I'll be able to post it.
I got you. I got them already.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually got a slide so they can scan the QR code too. So.
Oh, perfect.
Professional.
Yes.
It's like you've done this before.
I've done it a few times. I'm still practicing though. It's like a two-way door, you know. So while we're in here, some things that I want to talk about is when you're communicating or working or sending inference, as it's called, to large language models or foundation models, there's some things you need to keep in mind. One is going to be a system prompt. So if I tell it to act as a network engineer, it's actually going to change how it responds this time. So if I ask it the same question, now it knows to actually answer this in the voice or the tone.
Using cider blocks and stuff like that. It's actually giving you network engineer terminology.
Correct.
Nice.
And then the next thing, if we want to control like the randomness and the diversity of the model responses, there's a couple settings we could adjust depending on the model. It's stated across the industry that the main one, if you don't have domain specific expertise in generative AI, is to adjust the temperature. The higher the temperature, the more random the response. The lower the temperature, the more predictable the response. And what do I mean by that? The foundation models or large language models, all they're using is prediction. They see all of these use cases and data that from questions like how do you configure a network, and then it knows based off the vectors, and I'll talk about vectors here in a moment, the words that are related to the question that you're asking to give you the most specific response. If the temperature is at 0, if it's at 1, okay, well, I may have 3 or 4 words to choose from in this bucket. Well, if it's 1, I may choose the 4th most unrelated word to give you more, I would say, random or more character to the response, right? So that's something to think about. If you want to have a more specific tone where you get kind of the same response every time, that's where you're going to adjust something like the temperature. Top P and top K. Top P is kind of handles the amount of words you have to choose from, and top K kind of handles the grouping of that word. So think of temperature adjusting the range of words, top P adjusting the amount of words, and then top K kind of giving you that broad of the amount of words. And then finally, the maximum length. So let's say I wanted to respond within 459 words. What this is going to do is tell the model when it responds to keep it short. So it's going to do its best to do that, but sometimes, yeah. So it cuts it off here within that amount of character length, right? So that's how many tokens or how many characters it's going to respond. So if you're
I was going
trying
to say, is maximum length words or tokens?
I would say I believe. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
Let me get back to you. We're talking generative AI. I want to say tokens, but again, a word can be a token. A word sometimes
right.
Two tokens or whatever. So, but I'll get back to you on that because I'm not really clear off the top of my head. So that's the chat playground. Next, we have images where we can test image generation. Here we have Amazon Titan image generator, which is pretty cool. So if I ask it to generate a image of a dog on a beach, it's going to give me 3 different images that it will generate. And this could be helpful for graphic designers. A lot of people use it for thumbnails and videos and blogs. They're being used for concepts. I even seen where people that are selling houses now are generating images for to furnish houses rather than actually furnishing the house. They use the generative AI to actually furnish the house in the image.
Oh,
I thought you were gonna say they were making up pictures of houses to fake sell. Yeah, look at this beautiful house. You show up, it's a shotgun shack.
yeah. What was that show? Catfish, like catfish housing.
Now, going back to the chat playground, and we'll kind of spend some time in here because I think one of the things that I mentioned was that the model doesn't have an understanding of what is the date. So if I ask it, what is today? It's going to say, unfortunately, I don't know what today's date is. So how do you actually get the date? One of the ways to do that is by using agents. And so in Amazon Bedrock, we have a couple different ways to orchestrate data into a model. Hold the thought on the date. The next thing I want to ask it is about Amazon Titan watermark protection. So what is Amazon Titan image generation watermark protection? This is actually a new feature that was, or image detection. So it's not familiar with that. It has no contextual understanding. So I mentioned agents. What we can do is actually create a knowledge base. So a knowledge base, when I mentioned retrieval augmented generation, what it does is traditionally, and I can actually show you through code, what you would have to do in code, you would actually have to use something like lane chain. So in generative AI, there's a lot of different, I would say, libraries in Python specifically that people use to handle the different pipelines and workflows that you need generative AI. One of them is RAG, and as well as conversation through memory. So if I'm using Python to be able to, let's say, ask a question here. So I asked it a simple question through inference. Now it doesn't have my credentials. I'll put them in here in a minute. Anyway, I asked it here for what is AWS. It's just going to respond once on that API call, just that one time. So how do I actually solve that? Well, that's where lane chain actually comes in to be able to handle the memory of the response, to have a conversation like in the chatbot. That's where the lane chain library comes in. And so when we're going back to Bedrock, lane chain also allows you through code to handle, let's say, retrieval augmented generation. So if it doesn't have contextual understanding of what is Amazon Titan watermark detection, then I could actually store that information, let's say on a website. It can retrieve from a website, retrieve it from an S3 bucket, or wherever your data source is. In this case, using knowledge bases, our data source is going to be an S3 bucket.
Mm.
So now inside of my knowledge base, I could come in here and select my model, and I'm using this S3 bucket that has this blog information. I can ask this same question, watermark detection. And as you can see, it's retrieving and generating a response. It's going to search the S3 bucket. And now it can actually answer the question, because although this service or this feature was announced last month and Clyde, I mentioned, was trained, its training date was August 2023. So now it has the contextual understanding through my prompt that was provided from this chunk being the blog post from the announcement that's stored in the S3 bucket. And as you can see, we can actually see the reference to each of these chunks where it retrieved the information from. And I'll kind of pause here if you all have any questions.
Several, but okay. Is it taking that information? It's not adding it to the pre-existing large language model. It's augmenting it. So it's called retrieval augmented generation. So it's augmenting the pre-existing Claude LLM with this new additional model. But does it then incorporate it into it for going forward? Like if somebody creates an agent, is that if you take that S3 bucket away, does it lose the ability to answer that question?
Correct.
Okay.
So
okay.
And I'll come back to it. Let's start here. So when we're talking about customizing foundation models, the first way we can do it is through a prompt. Let's say it doesn't know anything about Amazon Titan, image generation, watermark detection. It doesn't know anything about that. So what we can do inside our prompt, we can append at the bottom of the prompt or somewhere in the prompt the information it needs to answer the question. That's prompt engineering. So we add the context in the context window of the prompt.
Sure.
The next way is going to be through RAG. So now retrieval augmented generation. Basically, we're building a way to take our prompt and augment the external information into the prompt before it goes to the large language model.
Gotcha.
And I'll show you how that looks in a moment so we can come back to it. Now, when we're using RAG, this is only for that single prompt, or the conversation doesn't have the context of the question or the watermark detection feature, right? But once that conversation is over, the model no longer knows anything about that.
Makes sense.
Now let's say we want to have a model that has full contextual understanding of Amazon Titan, image generation, watermark detection. What we could do is say, okay, RAG worked for us, but we want it to have a deeper understanding and be able to ask using the model without leveraging the RAG. And also we wanted to have more information around AWS specific domain knowledge, right? Because RAG has its limitations. We'll talk about those in a moment. So what we could do is fine tune. This is where we take, let's say, Cloud 3 Sonnet or Haiku, and we tune it with labeled data to, let's say, question or prompt and responses, so the model can actually see, okay, here are some prompt and response examples. Retrain the model, fine tune the model. So now when you ask the model about those specific questions or to summarize something about that topic, it has an understanding.
So in essence, if you wanted to, I know you use an S3 bucket as your example, but could you point it to the documentation in AWS?
So Amazon Q Business allows you to use multiple data sources. With agents, you can, and I'll show you agents here in a moment.
Okay.
With agents, you basically can use the Lambda function to retrieve to do a lot of different things. I'll show you here in a moment how that actually looks, because that's a little different.
Awesome.
And then finally, it's going to be you train a foundation model from scratch. This is where you have hardware, you have all the resources. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time to do this. This is where you're actually building your own cloud or GPT model.
I would name it Jean-Claude.
Copyright infringement.
Okay, so retrieval, meaning you get the information from, let's say, your external data source or knowledge base, like an S3 bucket, for example. Next, you augment the information, meaning that you take the information that you retrieve and you augment it into your prompt. So the prompt that actually goes to the large language model includes the related information to help the model answer your question or your query. And then finally, the generation is the response from the model once it was able to receive the entire prompt.
Right.
And then this is how the actual workflow looks. You have at the bottom, let's focus on the bottom, the data ingestion. So here is the blog post. It goes into our S3 bucket. Now, the thing about knowledge base was makes this so, I would say, easy to use and saves a lot of time and removes a lot of challenges for developers, is that once it's in this S3 bucket, AWS is actually handling the creating embeddings. So think of embeddings as taking the words or the phrases that you have in your blog, and then you're converting them to numbers that machine learning models can understand, right? And then once you have that, you take those numbers and then you store it into what you call a vector store. A vector store is like a high-level database that lets you know, okay, which word is related to another word. And it does this across multiple dimensions. So it's a multi-dimension level vector database that stores those vector numbers or those vectors. And so here's an example of an embeddings, what they actually look like, and I'll show you here in a moment. So this is the data ingestion. So it goes from blog posts in the S3, create embeddings. So take the blog post itself, the words, turn it into numbers, store it in a vector store. Now, when I ask a question, what is AWS? What it does is semantic search or some type of search to say, okay, which chunks, because it stores it in chunks in the vector database, and we'll talk about those. I'll show you that in a minute here as well. Which chunks are most related to the question that you're asking? And it takes that chunk, okay, this paragraph will answer the question that you have. And then it will append it to the context window of the prompt, and then that goes to the large language model.
Response.
Any questions? I know that there's a lot to ingest, but if you build it locally a couple times, in workshop, you can kind of go through this and build it yourself. It guides you through it. And in Bedrock, it makes it really easy to set up your own knowledge base, sync it. Which this is another piece. If you build this locally, or you build it on an EC2 instance or wherever you build it in your data center, you actually have to update this data store, right? You actually have to update the embeddings model, and you have to manage the database. These are all pieces that you have to do, and so Bedrock kind of handles that for us.
Right.
And so when we look at knowledge bases, if I come back in here and I click on my data source, it lets us know that this actually comes from an S3 bucket, and I could actually sync it. It lets us know when it was sunk. And so anytime I update it, I just click sync, and whatever I have new inside of S3 will sync. And I could actually automate this process as well, where I can trigger anytime using EventBridge or something, anytime a document is inside of the S3 bucket, update the vector store as well.
What kind of documents can it take? Is it just text files? Can it be PDFs? Can it read anything?
PDFs, text files, Markdown, CSV, all types of files.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Doesn't it
so I
depend
can
on the,
upload my entire IT library to an S3 bucket and have it be my brains on demand.
Yes. So let's go back in here, because I want to when we talk about fine tuning in RAG, there's something we need to kind of understand. Let's go watermark.
but doesn't that also depend on the I mean, I know the documents, you can add any kind of document, but doesn't it also depend on the model that you do choose? Because some models are just language models, and then there are foundational models which can do anything.
Correct.
Okay.
That's always going to be a factor, right?
Yeah.
That's always going to be a factor. One thing that I want to reference is that I mentioned something called chunks. When you're sending, let's say, to Amazon Titan embeddings, the token size for that, the largest token size, let's say, is 4,096 tokens. So 4,000 tokens. That means a chunk size. So that could be 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, or whatnot. When it goes into the vector store, it will take that chunk or multiple chunks. Here, I believe it's up to 5 chunks that are related to your actual question when it gets it from the vector store, when it queries the vector store before it appends it to the prompt. So that means if it doesn't have full context in that paragraph, it may be missing some context. So this is where data engineering is still important, right? Being able to understand how to clean and sanitize your data to ensure when the chunks are being created, it's going to be able to answer and solve your problems the way you intend. So this is one of the challenges with RAG, is that, yes, you can use it. It would help you generate a response, but is it the response you expect? So this is where it comes testing, cleaning the data, and doing everything you need to, kind of get the accuracy that you're looking for.
Is that also where you would? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shala.
No worries. I was going to say, and that brings up another question, because I've heard you mention about, say when you supply your source data and it creates these chunks and stuff like that, and it tries to find data that's related to each other. Is that something that you have to tell it, like, this is related to this, or is it able to figure that kind of thing out on its own?
The vector database, the actual Titan embeddings. So that's, if we come in here to providers, I believe there's multiple embedding models, but the one we're using specifically for this is going to be the Amazon Titan text embeddings. And what it does is it does the vector normalization for you. So you send it text and it gives you vectors back. So it handles that for you. You don't have to do that. Even if you built this solution on your own, there's models that actually does the vector handling for you. You just have to handle managing the vector store and adding the vectors there. Now, the type of, and I think I have a slide on this. There are different types of retrievals, right? The type of retrieval we're using now is semantic search. So we're finding the related based off the most probable vectors to our response, right? The most probable embeddings to our question. This is semantic search. But there's also rule-based search, where we're just basically fetching unstructured data and documents. There's also structured data type searches. So there's different types of searches when you're actually querying the vector database or the vector store. But for this use case, we're using the semantic search. That's where we're actually using the most related embeddings. So you can actually control that if you're actually building this on your own.
Nice. And I do see one question in the chat. I'm gonna throw it out there. This is from Matrix. They are asking, what is different between GitHub Copilot and GenAI? How can we integrate GenAI with pipelines or Terraform?
Chris, you might can answer that better than me.
That's a lot. That's a lot of
Right.
different question.
I wanted to just ask it just so we see it, but yeah, that's something I actually play around with a lot, and so that's actually like a pretty heavy question.
I'm googling the answers right now. Honestly, I mean, leveraging generative AI. I mean, you can use it in a number of different ways to help walk you through the build of a pipeline.
Yeah.
You can also use it to help you build HCL, the Terraform language and stuff like that. As far as the difference between GitHub Copilot and generative AI, I mean, it leverages it. But is this one of those chicken and egg questions where not all Gen AI is GitHub Copilot, but all GitHub Copilot is Gen AI? I'm not sure.
So can I give him an example real quick?
Yeah, totally.
So we have a service called Amazon Q.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon Q is AWS's kind of generative AI service for your IDE, right?
Right.
Let's say I want to understand what this code is. What I could do is highlight this code. I could right click it. I could come down here to send to Amazon Q, and I could ask it to explain it. And so what happens is the chat opens up, enters my code in the IDE, or the chat in the IDE will explain what this code block is. I could also have it generate code. So this is all generative AI being used to help the software developer develop, understand, iterate, improve, and fix our code, because it can help us fix our code as well.
Right. And effectively that is, I mean, it's leveraging generative AI to do that, and that's effectively what GitHub Copilot is also doing as well. I mean, there's a bunch of different ones out there that are trying to do that, and everybody's trying to get their flavor into your IDE. So to answer Matrix Troy's question, say that 5 times fast. GitHub Copilot leverages generative AI to help answer the questions. So it's using it, but it's when you say the difference, there's not much of a difference, because that's what it is.
They're assistants. They're coding assistants. So
right.
Yeah.
I've been using it all the time. Q has gotten significantly better since I first started playing with it.
Yes, and I'll show an example here in a moment. But going back to the chat playground, we'll take a look at agents, and then if you all have questions, we can do that, and I'll show the use case if we got time.
Let's do it.
All right. So coming in here, if I ask the model, what is today? Oh, it can tell me. Look at that. Let's see why it can tell me. Probably because it's using my agent. Well, awesome. Let's come in here. Let's. I don't want this enabled, so we're going to disable it, and we'll save and exit. Now we'll come back in here and we'll ask the model. Try it again. What time is it? It's time for lunch. As you can see, the model actually does not know what time it is. It also does not know what date it is.
Hey, what are those metrics on the bottom? It says model metrics.
This actually tells us the latency.
Let's see. Okay.
And the input token, the output token. So if we're trying to understand, if we're testing and we're trying to understand, okay, how is the model performing? This is actually going to tell us here.
How come cost is blank?
I was about to say, does that update in real time? That's important.
I'm actually in like a workshop account, maybe in a real account. It may show up. I'm not sure. So,
gotcha.
and actually, the type of inference that I'm doing now on Sonnet,
Mhm.
it isn't that many tokens, right? So it may be the larger responses will generate that. So
Good. Thank you.
all right, no problem. So right now we don't have a contextual understanding of what time it is or what today is. Well, what we can actually do is create an agent, which I've already created. And basically what an agent is, it allows the model to have additional features in order for it to perform a task. And my model is enabled again. All right, so if we come in here, my agent, this is the demo used to give the LLM the current time and date. When I created my agent, this is the instruction that I gave the agent. You are a helpful agent who can give the current time and date. So this is what the LLM sees. Then I have an action group. This action group basically has different action functions inside of it. I have one called get time, which gets the current time in UTC. And then I have another one, get date, which gets the current date in month, date, year format. Now, what this means is that I am able to call a Lambda function to actually get the current time and date and pass it into the prompt. Just like retrieval augmented generation, it calls the Lambda function, gets the information, analyzes it, and provides a response. And so here's my Lambda function. Inside the Lambda function, I have two nested functions, get time and get date. I use the if statement. If the function is get time, return the time. If the function is get date, return the date. And this is basically my agent that I can use if I save and edit, prepare. I can test the agent to say, or I can test the model and say, what time is it? And so now the model can tell me what time is it, and it can tell me what day is it. Now I've actually built this out in my own account to be able to tell me everything about my network in AWS. And I have a collection of Lambda functions that I use as agents to be able to test my AWS account, tell me if I have any internet gateways on VPCs, if I have any routes to internet gateways, and etc. We also have services to do this, but I wanted to see if I could get an agent to do it to use generative AI. Any questions?
I have some, but I was holding them.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's just like simple questions. Like for me, I'm someone where I'm trying to get deeper into AI. So it's kind of like, what are like some good workshops, tutorials, or ways to start studying it? Which I think what you showed here today has been a great jump off part, which I appreciate a lot. But it also sounds like you have a workshop coming up.
Yes, I have all of these that I want to share. If anyone is interested in learning more about prompt engineering, learning more about lane chain and Amazon Bedrock, as well as vector databases. The middle one is the workshop. Feel free to check that out.
Awesome.
And if you complete this survey, you will get $25 in AWS credits.
Nice.
Now,
somebody's making that noise.
It wasn't even me.
Always blaming Shala for everything. What's going on?
We got time for my use case before we go?
Yes.
Yeah, of course we do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So inside of, how many of you use CloudFormation or some type of IAC? I'm not going to ask you, Chris, everyone else.
Well, Shala, what IACs do you use?
Huh?
Well, one of the challenges is that for me, I deploy a CloudFormation template, and I
Mhm.
go through this process of, oh, it broke. I had to go back in the console, or I had to go into the CLI, see why it broke, take the root cause, go to Google. Maybe I wind up in a rabbit hole on Stack Overflow or Reddit trying to figure out how to fix it. What if we could actually use generative AI to actually solve this? So I actually wrote some code that's inside of that. I've deployed it in all my regions, that anytime a CloudFormation template fails, send it to Amazon Bedrock and then analyze it and then email me the actual reason that it failed and next steps that I can do to remediate it. And I'll pull up the code here in the diagram so you all can see it. So this is actually what it looks like. CloudFormation stack failure, event bridge rule triggers a Lambda function. I send it to Amazon Bedrock Cloud 3 Sonnet to first determine the root cause, provide the analysis, and then the next steps to remediate it. Then I send it to Haiku to determine if the response from Cloud 3 Sonnet was accurate or not. And then if it was accurate, send me an email on what I should do to fix it. And if we come back and we look at the source, here's my actual Lambda function. Pretty simple. This is 89 lines of code that I use to actually troubleshoot this. Here's my prompt. Here's the cool thing about Cloud 3 Sonnet. Normally, I mentioned that when you actually write a prompt, you should provide some type of instruction. You should provide examples. You should do all this. Cloud 3 Sonnet is smart enough to look at my example of what I want and then send it to me. So I just give it the email. I provide the reason. It determines the root cause. It explains the analysis and reasoning. It provides the next step to resolve the issue and sends me this email exactly this way every time.
No way.
Mhm.
Sick.
And so
Okay.
if I come in here to CloudFormation and I just deploy a stack for, let's see, let's say a VPC failure. VPC.
I will say though, Chris, that CloudFormation grew on me. I appreciate it. I liked it.
But there's no favorites here. You can enjoy whatever you want.
Okay, so this is deploying, and I'm gonna close that. I'm gonna bring my email over here so we can see it.
vBrownBag is a tool agnostic area where we all get together to learn.
Yeah, like my rule of thumb, in all seriousness, is if you're working with stuff that is all in AWS, CloudFormation is my go-to.
So we can see the VPC failed.
Yep.
And we come back to my email, and we do a send and receive a couple times. Well, that's
I thought we were going to get to see your actual inbox, but no.
I've done this a few times, and I've shown my inbox a few times.
You're really good at presenting. You got all the tricks covered here.
All right, so we come into our Lambda function. We can see if this has been triggered.
Oh, Lambdas! I love them so
look,
much.
there's our notification
There it
right
is.
there. There it is. And notice I didn't have to provide any instructions or examples on what I needed. I just provided what I wanted, and it lets us know how to resolve the issue and everything.
I love
And
that it's
just
odd.
You're just giving me more stuff to work on. And
so,
test out.
Yeah. And so since this is like a DevOps conversation, imagine this being in like your pipeline. Your pipeline fails, you have some automatic analysis, and then the emails it out, and then you can take it one step further. Now you can maybe have some automatic troubleshooting, some basic troubleshooting to determine with generative AI. These are all things that are capable or possible with the right testing and the right team to build out the solution, or the right person.
Yeah,
And
that's
Claude was smart enough to figure out that even though it was an F string and you had a variable for reason, the other parts weren't. Those were just regular old brackets, and it still knew enough. It still was quote unquote smart enough to support to supply the relevant information in there too. That's spookily clever.
Yeah, if you actually read the Anthropic prompting, I put the document in there, but there's an Anthropic prompting guide, and it kind of talks about the tags and the ways that you
Okay.
can get it to handle that. And so I just kind of followed the ways that it suggested, and yeah, it was smart enough to do it.
Nice.
So with this, I know we talked about email. That same sort of format, is there a way to do something similar where maybe it could send something over to Slack to like an alerts channel or something?
Yeah, so if we take a look at the code, right? Right here, I just have syntax and I'm using SNS. All you have to do is import whatever Slack library you're using and have it send a Slack.
Ooh, you gonna make me dangerous at work.
Yep. And actually, I wrote something to summarize AWS blogs. That's one of the first things I built, was something to summarize blogs and just send it to me in Slack.
We got one quick question.
Yes,
They're
Haiku
asking,
Sonnet.
yeah.
So if we look here, basically this is the initial create my prompt. This is my prompt response sent to Cloud Sonnet. And then I have a verified prompt where I pass in the response from Sonnet. And then the verified response where I send the prompt to Haiku. So basically I have one function where all I have to do is pass in the actual prompt and the model name. Where is it at? Somewhere. Verified prompt, and then the actual model. Yeah, model ID. Where is model ID? Yeah, so I just pass in a model ID, and then I can use the same function for both and that's one of the benefits of using Amazon Bedrock. You change one line of code and you can communicate between the different models. And so again, if the verified response is true, I just check my CloudWatch logs and determine, okay, that was correct. If it's false, I go check my CloudWatch logs, but I could easily send it to a DynamoDB table or something to have some type of track and trace inside of my code, or do something different. But I just kept it simple so I could show you the different examples. You're on mute, Chris.
You know what? It's almost like I haven't done this before. What am I doing? Just hanging out on mute. How embarrassing for me. Dude, this is amazing stuff. I'm definitely going to be jumping on those QR codes and firing up the Bedrock workshop. Is that Bedrock workshop? Can you said it's going to last for 2 days, or
it's going to last for 2 days? I'm gonna send you the link in LinkedIn. So if you want to share it out to, like, if you have email lists or something, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So 2 days from now, or 2 days from when somebody starts it?
From now. So about a day and a half from now.
Perfect. Okay. I will send that out, and hopefully people will jump on it.
Awesome.
Cool. Shala, Roger, any other questions? I know we went a little bit long, but I mean, this is so good. We could have gone for another hour, and I would have forgotten.
I think it's another one of those where I wouldn't mind a part 2, because there's definitely more that could be like dug into. Just throwing that out there.
I got some real cool tools that I didn't show that I really want to show.
Oh, that's the next show. Cool tool.
Well, Du'An is your brother, so you have to talk with him. Awesome. Du'An, thanks for coming on. This was absolutely amazing. Folks, what we will be posting the video with all of the links in there. But if you are in this live studio audience and you want to get on that, then Du'An, do you want to put that Bedrock workshop QR code up real fast again, right at the very end, just so people can jump on that?
Yes. And if you have any problems with it, just pay me and we'll get it straightened out. And that's the credit codes. So if you fill out this survey, you get $25 AWS credits. And here's the Bedrock workshop in the middle.
There it is, folks. All right. Well, if you want to do it, jump on it. There we go. Somebody's saying do it.
That's funny.
One last question for Du'An. Do you lab every day for real?
I read every day these days. When I was network engineer, I was labbing every day, but now there's so much I had to stay up to speed. I'm more reading than I am labbing. But I was trying to write code every day, but that's hard. It's hard because I have projects that I'm working on, and it's hard to keep up with the projects because I get pulled in so many different directions, and then I lose my creativity too. So, but yeah, I read every day these days. Like now, I'm reading this.
Nice.
Machine learning for working cloud engineers. All right. Yeah. You have to send a link for that one.
I got you. It's a good one too.
Are there any other books that you would recommend for those enthusiasts out there looking to get started with generative AI or getting an understanding of generative AI?
I got a gist that I put together. It's more so white papers. Like there's a new white paper written almost every day on this stuff, and so that to me, that's the best way to stay up to speed. And if you don't want to read them, build you a summarization chatbot that'll summarize it, and you can ask questions about it. Upload the PDF or whatever, or download the URL, however you want to do it. But to me, when we're talking about learning, I think there's new ways to learn, right? Of course, you got to build your foundational knowledge, but there's a way to get clarity. Like we all can have kind of like a mentor at our fingertips, and if we're not clear on something, we can use LinkedIn. If the model is saying something and we don't know if it's right, we can reach out on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever, come to V Brown Bag, wherever, and ask questions. The resources are kind of like in abundance right now.
We're going to take that little snippet and use that as our promo from now on.
Dude, that's our sizzle reel. Are you kidding me? I'm using that for the next 10 years. It's amazing.
There is one more question in the audience. How do you not get overwhelmed with the sheer possibilities of this tech? I feel like it's a continuous scratch on the surface.
How do I not get overwhelmed? That's a good question.
We don't. We all get overwhelmed.
He summarizes everything. Right.
I get overwhelmed at reInvent. That's probably the one time I get overwhelmed is reInvent. But other than that, I have a lot of fun doing this. Man, I really wanted to start this show with a song my son made with generative AI. And he did this without me telling him about it, right? Without me saying anything. He came to me and was like, Dad, listen to this song I made. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. It was about Kyrie Irving playing basketball. It was a rap song, nice beat, everything. And he did this on his own without me even saying anything to him about it. So it's just so many cool things happening,
Yeah, it's awesome when they see the kids using it and getting involved in the technology. So yeah, it's great.
But I'm keeping a list of like white papers and blogs, and it's like I don't even have everything on here, but this is kind of like the things that I recommend reading if you got time.
We'll put the link to the gist in the show notes for the canned video, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the other links that you're going to send to me as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. All right, folks. Well, for folks in the live studio audience, thank you for attending Du'An. This was absolutely amazing. Folks, we will see you again next week. Have a wonderful evening. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.